So a lot of times with ADHD, I like to use the analogy of two different kinds of cars. You can drive an automatic transmission, right? With that kind of car, you get in the car, turn on the ignition, and you drive in all kinds of different conditions, and you really don't have to think about changing gears because your car is doing that gear changing automatically. If you're driving a stick shift, it's much more complicated to learn to drive that car, right? It's a much bigger learning curve to do that manually. To be like, okay, I'm going up this hill, and so therefore I'm switching this gear, and now I'm putting in the clutch, and I'm doing all of these steps in pieces. And whereas a person driving the automatic transmission, these things are just happening. So for those of us who are driving this manual transmission, it's happening because we're walking through it, because we're having to go through each piece manually and step through. It's the same thing for your brain if you have ADHD. Like, there are some skills or different kind of processes that people with a more typical type of brain are just going to be going through without having to manually go through them. These are the executive functioning skills that we're talking about. If you have ADHD, you have to spend more energy learning these skills and doing them in a way that looks different than the person who's driving the automatic transmission. But here's the cool part. If you learn to do this and stop judging yourself for having to learn to do this, eventually you're functioning the same. In fact, it'd be a little awkward to do it their way because you're used to doing it your way. There's not a good and bad here. There is a distinct difference. And what also happens is that people who are driving the automatic transmission don't even know that they're driving the automatic transmission. If somebody is doing this and it's happening under the hood, right? They're not seeing it. They don't know that their brain's just doing this for them. They don't have to think through these steps. They may not understand how to explain those steps to you. And that they even exist, it doesn't mean that they don't exist. They exist for you. If you have ADHD, the need to step through this manually, the need to learn how to compensate or strengthen for skills that other people have a role in already. The other day I was talking to someone and they were asking what I was doing. We were just talking, small talk. And when they found out that the kind of coaching I did, the person said, so you just teach people how to make lists? And she just had this kind of look and check myself for a minute, because you can feel defensive if you have ADHD and you hear that, or if you're working with people with ADHD and you hear that. But the reality is that even though that might seem like an insensitive or even like a little snarky dig, the person who said this to me drives a car with an automatic transmission, right? She's a neurotypical gal, and it's really hard for her to understand that some people have to walk through these gear shifts because it happens automatically for her, right? What she doesn't understand, because of the car she drives, the brain she has, is that all these making a list and using that list actually requires a ton of executive functioning skills. You have to be like prioritizing and sequencing and regulating your attention. There's all kinds of things that are happening when you're making a list and actually using that list, right? We know how to make a list. That's what a dump list is. Super helpful. Get all those things in your head dumped out on paper. That is where your external storage is, right? What happens is a lot of people with ADHD take this list of 10 weeks worth of things to do, and they try to figure out how to use that list, and that's where it breaks down. Somebody who's driving this automatic transmission has ways of breaking that down that are happening automatically up here, right? They don't need to learn this skill. They don't need to learn strategies or ways to compensate for this because it's just happening. If you're someone who's driving a manual transmission or learning how to drive this manual transmission, you gotta learn to step through all these things. You've gotta learn which gears to move into if for this task or this kind of hill, or you're going downhill, or you're going around this, you're changing your speed. And if somebody looks at you and says, okay, like, what's the big deal? It can irritate you, it can offend you, but take a step back and realize that this is not necessarily meant to be cruel. This is a lack of understanding for someone who does not have the same kind of brain you do. They don't drive the same kind of car. How would they know, driving their automatic transmission, that all these things are being done for them automatically? Well, how would they know that? If they don't know that already, they haven't lived it, it can be hard to grasp. You can choose if a part of advocating for yourself is trying to explain that. I recommend saving your energy and making that decision wisely for yourself and not spending it on somebody who's not too curious about you in that difference. But if it is somebody who's sincerely curious about it and wants to understand more about it, that's a place you can decide, hey, to explain that difference to them. And that can be helpful or not. Like, you don't have to explain it to anybody, but it's good for you to know it. It's good for you to understand what you need, what's different, and tease apart what help you need so you can get it. So you can use strategies that work for you. Because honestly, once you're driving, once you're accustomed to doing any of that motor memory, that becomes your normal and it becomes fine. You drive your car, you function just fine. You can count on yourself to show up. You can count on yourself not to stall out. Count on yourself to show up to where you're driving using the manual transmission. In fact, if you're somebody who's really used to using it, you're gonna feel really uncomfortable driving the other car. My Spanish friend was visiting the US and had to drive an automatic transmission, and she was so out of sorts. She said, I know that technically that should be easier. It's not easier. I'm so used to changing gears. For her, she said, it even helps me pay attention because it's more active. And so it just felt so awkward to drive that automatic transmission. We're not talking about good and bad differences. We're just talking about differences and ways you can work with them. If you want some more help with this, more help finding this, there's a couple options. You can watch this video up here and learn more about overwhelm, my overwhelm flow sheet, and that's how to use that dump list in a different way. And you can also check out my group coaching program where we take these tools and we apply it in real life, and we'd love to have you there. And thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.